Grace and peace to you from the one who is, and who was, and who is to come. People who study these sorts of things will tell you that one of the most important trends in business over the last few years is a concept called disruption. Disruption is a clear and undeniable break from business as usual. Disruption usually creates signs that it's coming, but more often than not, people don't read these signs or resist the coming disruption that these signs are pointing to. And disruption ultimately has impact far beyond the one doing the disrupting, because in the end, it changes people's habits. Disruption is a fairly abstract idea, so I want to offer an example I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with. Netflix. Netflix has disrupted television. Until about a decade ago, business as usual in the industry was that a cable company controlled what equipment you could use to receive content, when you could watch that content, and which bundles of channels you could access at different price points. Netflix came along and broke from business as usual. Netflix allowed people to use whatever equipment they wanted. It gave people the option of watching shows whenever they wanted, and offered all of their content to all of their customers for a single price. While there are many players in the TV industry that are scrambling to adapt and to respond to this disruption, it didn't come out of nowhere. If people were able to read the signs, they could have seen it coming. The first player in the entertainment industry that truly felt the disruption that Netflix created was a company called Blockbuster. When Blockbuster went out of business, it was a sign that the way people accessed their entertainment was changing. But a lot of players in the industry didn't understand this sign and simply continued with business as usual. All of this disruption has gone on to have an impact far beyond the business models that cable companies and TV networks use. Netflix has changed people's habits. As more and more providers offer a Netflix-like option to deliver their content, fewer and fewer of us see the same episode of the same show at the same time every week. People watch on their own time, and more, rather than watching over the course of a whole season. People binge watch a season in a matter of days, or maybe even a matter of hours. This disruption has even changed how they make episodes of TV shows, with less need for a recap in each episode and fewer cliffhangers, since the next episode starts automatically in a few seconds anyway. But for as big of a disruption as Netflix has been, it was not the first phenomenon that was disrupted. And for as much time as I spend watching Netflix, it is far from the most important disruption that touches our lives. We're gathered here this morning to lift up and celebrate the ultimate disruption, the resurrection. For generation after generation, it was business as usual when it came to the relationship between life and death. Life creates life, and death ends it. Well, this is certainly far from an ideal model. It is more reliable than anything else we know. But through the cross and the empty tomb, God creates a clear and undeniable break from business as usual, showing us that God has the power to redeem death. All of us know that death is still real. It still separates us from our loved ones. It still disrupts life. God doesn't do away with death, but in the resurrection, in creating that ultimate disruption, God redeems death. God transforms it from a destructive disruption in our lives into a creative disruption that gives rise to new life. For as earth-shattering as this disruption is, it didn't come out of nowhere. There were signs that this ultimate disruption was coming, but people didn't see the signs, or they saw them and resisted the ultimate disruption these signs pointed to. From the prophet Ezekiel, who preached about life returning to dry bones, to Job, who affirmed that even after he died, he would see his Redeemer live in the flesh, to Isaiah, who brought us the promise that God would destroy the shroud cast over all people and swallow up death forever. And all through the entire book of Psalms, there were signs that the resurrection, the ultimate disruption, was coming. Jesus told his own students more than once that he would die and on the third day God would disrupt death and resurrect him to new life. Jesus had talked about the ways this new life would be a clear and undeniable break from business as usual. There were enough people who resisted this coming disruption to business as usual. And there were enough of them that they had Jesus killed to try and keep this disruption from coming. In the resurrection, God made this disruption happen anyway. But even Jesus' own students didn't see the signs of this ultimate disruption that Jesus himself had promised. They continued with business as usual, going to the tomb that first Easter morning, prepared to deal with Jesus' death, but not ready for his resurrection. The heavenly messengers that greeted them there seemed to have a hard time believing that the women or any of the disciples couldn't read the signs. They posed my favorite question in the whole Bible. Why do you look for the living among the dead? The ultimate disruption, the resurrection, has an impact far beyond the one who was resurrected and even those first disciples who preached this good news. By disrupting that tried and true relationship between life and death, the resurrection transforms our lives. This is because the resurrection doesn't only have the power to redeem the moment when our bodies stop being alive. The resurrection also invites and empowers us to redeem all the moments that take life away. The resurrection creates the possibility of transforming them into moments that give rise to new life. The resurrection disrupts our hate for enemies and transforms it into love. The resurrection disrupts our desire for prestige and transforms it into a heart for service. The resurrection disrupts our appetite to acquire and transforms it into a hunger for generosity. Sisters and brothers, this is the day we lift up and celebrate the ultimate disruption. In resurrecting Jesus to new life, God disrupted the relationship between life and death. The resurrection transforms death from a destructive disruption in our lives to a disruption that gives rise to new life. This ultimate disruption is our reason for joy, our source of hope, and our promise of new life now and resurrection life to come. Thanks be to God.
Amen.